So a few weeks ago, I made a video reviewing Valheim, and you guys seemed to really like it. So I figured I'd make a video ranking all the biomes of the game from worst to best. This list is completely my opinion and isn't based in any objective categories. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So at number 8, I've put the ocean. Now in my opinion, the ocean is the worst biome in Valheim for a few reasons. The first and most prominent one is that it's not really complete development wise. It's the only major biome to not have a boss fight, and it's pretty devoid of content in comparison to the others. The only real gameplay the ocean offers aside from being a vessel for transportation are leviathans and sea serpents. The barnacles on the leviathan can be mined for chitin, and the sea serpent can be slayed for an amazing food source. And of course, the majority of a player's time in the ocean will be spent exploring for new lands. And to the biome's credit, it actually does a pretty good job of achieving this. Sailing is arguably the most fun method of transportation in all of Valheim. And the wind system mixed with seeing a new island on the horizon gives an exhilarating yet relaxing experience found nowhere else in the game. So with the ocean maybe in last place, it has its merits and is serviceable for what it is. So at number 7, I've put the swamp. Now this is probably going to be my most controversial opinion in this entire video. But just hear me out. You see, the swamp is way better than the ocean content-wise. I'd say it basically increases the amount of gameplay tenfold. It presents new enemies like the Leech, Draugr, and Abomination, and it introduces arguably the hardest boss of the entire game in the form of Bone Mass. So if all this is true, why did I rank it so low on the list? Well, in chronological order, it's the third biome, and if you're going in there with bronze, you're definitely not gonna have a fun time. Now, the spike in difficulty isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's how the biome presents its difficulty that annoys me specifically. Instead of giving you the creative challenges, it gives you the wet debuff 24/7 and an increase in poison-wielding enemies. I just feel like future biomes are far more creative and less frustrating with their difficulty increases. In my opinion, the wet debuff and poison-wielding enemies are more annoying than genuinely challenging and difficult. But despite my gripes with this biome, it does yield some of the best stuff in the game in the form of Bone Mass's Forsaken Power and the iron tools and weapons. Now overall, the swamp is definitely not a bad biome. It excels in many ways and is fun to explore. And if Valheim didn't have as many good biomes, this would be far higher on the list. So overall, Valheim Swamp does have some problems, but it stands out as enjoyable and fun to explore. So at number 6, I've put the Ashlands. Now this is the most recent biome added to Valheim and therefore the most challenging. It has multiple new armor sets and weapons, which are the most challenging we've seen thus far. It also adds a new ship in the form of the Draugr. Not to mention its boss fight, which I won't spoil, but it's one of the most excellent in all of Valheim. But the reason I put it so low really doesn't have to do with the difficulty. Don't get me wrong, constantly dying and having to retrieve my stuff from enemies is pretty annoying, but I mainly ranked it here because of a lack in terrain variety. It just feels like the other biomes have so much more to offer landscape-wise, while the Ashlands just feels like a repeat of the same orange terrain over and over again. The fortresses are very fun and it's very enjoyable to explore for the first few hours, but I feel like it gets stale faster than the other biomes. It has solid enemies, weapons, and armor, but overall, its lack of terrain variation holds it back and makes it kind of a middle-of-the-road biome, in my opinion. Alright, at number 5, Eye of the Mountains. Now, this might be the most treacherous biome in Valheim for a few reasons. The first of which being the temperature. The mountains is the only biome in Valheim to make you drink a potion or equip an item to combat the temperature. And let me tell you, having to run back to yourself without a frost mead is a major pain. Not to mention the enemies in this biome. The wolves are easily the most annoying because they roam in packs and are pretty hard to parry. They also aren't weak to any damage, there's no real reliable way to take them out consistently. There are also snow golems that can easily one-shot you and drakes that shoot you from afar. But despite that, I don't think the mountains are nearly as hard as the Ashlands, at least proportionally. The mountains introduce silver, which adds a new armor and tool set, along with the Fenrir's armor, which is insane for movement and arguably the best armor set in the entire game. The boss fight in this biome is also a definite highlight. Nothing beats the feeling of fighting a dragon atop a snowy peak. It almost feels like something straight out of the Lord of the Rings. Nothing beats the feeling of fighting a dragon atop a snowy peak. It almost feels like something straight out of the Lord of the Rings. The boss does have some annoying attacks, but it's not too hard overall. However, the mountain's dangerous terrain makes it so that any misstep will make the boss a pain to defeat. So yeah, I think that's about it for the mountains biome. It makes a good addition to the world and is fun to explore, which is why I rank it right here. Alright, so number 4, I've put the plains biome. Now this is one of the latest regions you encounter on your journey, and it's honestly one of my favorites. One thing I love is that you don't acquire black metal, the plains ore, by mining it, but by killing fuelings. This makes combat a key part of progression, which is always nice to see. Now you also need a string-like item called flax to make the new tools and weapons, and this is also found in fueling camps. This just adds another layer of usefulness to of fuelings and makes raiding a fueling outpost very satisfying. It also helps that in my opinion these enemies are pretty fun to fight. They do a lot of damage, but one well-placed parry can easily knock them off their feet enough for you to kill them. Not to mention fueling brutes, which are pretty tanky but not overly relentless, and mages that have staffs that can shoot projectiles and aid their friends. Now while fuelings are very fun to fight, there are some foes in this biome that just aren't fun to go up against, and the main one of these would be the Death Skeeto. These things have very sharp stingers that don't do too much damage but can stagger you and just be an overall nuisance. But these enemies are especially annoying if you're doing a corpse run back, because they can move faster than the player runs and can one-shot an unprepared Viking. I honestly can't count how many times these things have killed me when I'm trying to retrieve items from the grave. Now I can't wholeheartedly say that the Death Skeeto is a terrible enemy, because if you have pierce resistance, then you're pretty much fine. Not to mention their needles can be used to make amazing arrows. On the topic of frustrating enemies in the plains biome, there are tar pits in the plains which were added post-release. These pits have growths, which are basically regular blobs that poison you, shoot you, and slow you down for a handful of seconds. So yeah, that's about all I have to say about tar pits. Not fun to deal with. Now you might be wondering why I didn't dock the plains biome points because it has frustrating game design. Because that's pretty much the main reason I ranked the swamps so low. But while Death Skeetos and growths are annoying, they aren't unfair in my opinion. When it comes to Death Skeetos, if you equip a root harness and have Bone Mass's Forsaken power, their stings barely tickle you. And when it comes to the tar pits case, you can just avoid them altogether. They only prove relentless if you are unprepared for the biome. In contrast, the rain and other annoyances in the swamp stuck with you no matter how much you played on that biome. So overall, the plains biome is one of the best in the game and is one of the most fun late game. So number 3, I've put the meadows. Now this is where you start off in Valheim, and I'd honestly say it's the only biome that feels genuinely peaceful. It has ambient cozy music and stretches of green grass. The only monsters you have to contend with are the Necks and the Greylings, both of which are very rudimentary. This is also the biome most people make their first or even permanent base. The region's boss is Ichthyr, and he's relatively easy. It is possible to die, but with a crude bow or flint spear, there's really nothing to worry about. I'd say most players jumping into Valheim will over-prepare for this boss, and it'll be relatively easy for them. But this will lull them into a false sense of security, and they're gonna think every boss is as easy as Ichthyr. But the main thing you're gonna be doing in this biome is exploration. There are no ores to gather or insanely hard mobs to contend with. You just go through the motions of hunting deer, killing boar, and starting your base. It also shows players the ropes without overindulging on Valheim's grind. And as soon as you get bored of this routine, you can pretty much instantly move on to the second biome, which is later in this video. So overall, the Meadows is a very enjoyable biome and a great starting point for players jumping in. So number 2, I have the Mistlands biome. This is a very late game biome, but it is very revolutionary gameplay wise. It has a whole new weapon system in the form of the mage class and Eider, Valheim's mana. Similar to the mountains, it also gives players a debuff that you have to overcome. But unlike the mountains, this impairment comes visually rather than via temperature. After defeating the plains boss, you are able to acquire an item that allows you to see through the mist in the Mistlands. But that doesn't mean you're out of the woods, because monsters in the Mistlands are some of the most brutal by far. This includes Seekers and Seeker soldiers that can easily swarm you and catch you off guard, Ticks which apply a bleeding effect, and the most treacherous of them all, Gyals. These floating beasts do insane damage and are absolutely relentless. They are weak to pierce damage, so a few well-placed bow shots can kill them, but they can easily one-shot you if you are unaware. Now, I see many players complaining about this biome's terrain, and I can honestly see where this criticism comes from. But I honestly don't mind it too much because the treacherous nature feels more like a feature than a hindrance. The boss fight of this biome, Queen, is also one of the most enjoyable fights in the entire game, albeit a strenuous one. So overall, the Mistlands is a fantastic addition to Valheim and is totally deserving of the number 2 spot. And at number 1, I have the Black Forest. In chronological order, this is the second biome in Valheim's roster. It serves as the first genuinely challenging biome and is very revolutionary gameplay wise. For one, it adds the first viable ship in the form of the Carve, which is very necessary for the Viking fantasy. It also adds the first metal tool and armor set in the form of bronze. Now, the Black Forest is a pretty grindy stage of Valheim, which may irk some players. However, I think that the biome offers so much to do that it doesn't really hinder the experience too much. The Black Forest is extremely rich content wise, with trolls lurking in the treetops, skeleton crypts, and stone structures. Speaking of trolls, they're one of the most iconic enemies in Valheim, and for good reason. When you first encounter them, you don't think they pose a threat because every enemy up to that point has been super easy. But when you hit a troll for the first time with a flint spear, you realize that the game of Valheim might not be that easy. The troll might even mess your base up if you don't have a good bow yet. The troll almost gives you a hint to what's to come in the Black Forest. The Black Forest also adds Grey Dwarves, which are basically amped up Greylings. This is also the biome where where you first really start to explore. In the meadows, you explore your starting island and stop because there's really no reason to go farther. But once you extract all the resources from your starting island, you are urged to make a carve and sail forward. You will realize that the world is far bigger than just you and your starting island. Not to mention, the bronze gear is a major upgrade from the flint spear and deer pelts of the meadows. So overall, despite the grind, I think the Black Forest is the best biome for its revolutionary gameplay and content density. Alright, so that was my ranking of all the Valheim biomes. Let me know if you agree with this list, and if not, what would you change? Leave it in the comments below. But that's about it. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. And if you enjoyed this video, check out this one where I ranked my top 10 games ever made. But that's about it. Bye guys.